So, all right, we do a demonstration. We brought them into the office. For the first time ever, the CEO was brought in, and he hadn't been involved in the process at all up to this stage. And there was about 12 in the room. So I started whiteboarding, closed loop manufacturing, just in time and all that sort of stuff, and having a dialogue. And the dialogue became very strong. And an hour and a half later, the CEO looked at his watch. This is brilliant, but I've got to go. I'm out of here. So guys, I've seen enough. Thanks, let's go. And so they all stood up and said, thanks, John, that was great, fantastic. As they were walking out, the nerdy little guy at the back said, but I haven't seen the software yet. And the CEO sort of stopped. What I've seen is great. And they left. We got the order signed. 3 weeks later, I was out there with a CFO. We were sort of walking around. The CEO walked past and said, "Hey, John, good to see you here. What are you here for?" I said, "Oh, we're working out where we're going to put the computer." And there was silence. And he looked at me and said, "Does a computer come with this?" He had totally bought the outcome, no idea what the product was that was going to help deliver the outcome.
Hi, friends. Welcome to the Sales Enablement Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Paul. Now, that was John Smibert. John's the co-author of a new book titled The Wentworth Prospect. And we start off our conversation talking about John's book. It's a very unusual sales book because it's written in the form of a novel. So a complete story, very interesting read. So you want to make sure you check that out. In our conversation, John and I talk about why, as buyers have become more empowered, they don't value sellers and their advice like they used to, and why buyers don't believe sellers will positively influence their thinking about their business. We also get into how buying has changed and how it's become more complex and why the process oftentimes stalls, the buying process oftentimes stalls, and why buyers have difficulty gaining consensus among the stakeholder group and what that means for sellers. And we dive into why one of the biggest challenges for us as sellers today is to learn how to gain the buyer's trust as a valued, trusted advisor rather than as a product sales organization. This is really crucial. So we get into that and much, much more. But before we get to John, I want to remind you to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to it. And if you subscribe, we'd certainly appreciate if you could also leave us a review. Let us know how we're doing. We'd really appreciate that. So thank you. All right, let's jump into it.
John, welcome back to the show.
Andy, delighted to be here yet again. It's good to see you.
It's great to see you as well. We actually, listeners, we're actually seeing each other while we record this. Just people think we're imagining the other person on the other end of the line. So, how are things going?
Absolutely wonderful. As you know, I'm at the end of a 6-year project that. And in launching a book, so it's a massive relief to some extent, but also the exciting part when I get to talk to lots of people about it.
Yeah, well, I find that process that when I write a book and I talk to people about it, that I actually learn more about the book itself.
That's a good point. That's been happening quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, you sort of figure out, okay, well, this is what I wrote. Interesting. So you've done something, and excuse the pun. You've done something that for a sales book is really quite novel. You like that?
That's true. It's a novel.
So you've written a sales book in the form of a novel. It's titled The Wentworth Project. So why a novel?
Well, Wentworth Prospect.
Excuse me. Gosh, guy,
yep.
What a wrong
Wentworth it's all about a prospect we're trying to sell to, right?
Right, that's right.
So the Wentworth Prospect. Why a novel? It's when I started this project, I'd read another sales novel by Tony Hughes, the Joshua Principle.
Right, the Joshua Principle, his first book.
Yeah, and I thought that's a great way to communicate a message. And I love novels. I'm always got a novel I'm in the middle of. And I'm saying, well, lots of other people out there love novels too, even salespeople, right?
Sure. Well, yeah.
So I thought this is a great way to communicate a message. So I gave myself a challenge to write a better novel than Tony Hughes. Tony'd love to hear me say that, I'm sure.
I was talking to Tony yesterday, as a matter of fact. So,
okay. Well, Tony's written the foreword to the novel, which I was absolutely delighted with, and it's one of the best forwards I've ever read. I think it's brilliant. Anyway, my friend Wayne Maloney came to me and said, "Look, I've written 2 books." He'd been working with me on a program I've got, which is around deal strategy, helping organisations improve the way they strategize their deals. And he said, "I want to put this into my 3rd book. Do you mind if I do that?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, will you write it with me?" And I said, Yeah, I'll do that on one condition." He said, "What's that?" "We make it a novel." It's probably the worst bloody statement I've ever made in my life, because 6 years later I realised just what a job it is. But so we wrote a novel. It's on deal strategy, but it became much more than that. And I think the feedback we're getting so far is, I put it out to a lot of salespeople working in. My background's IT and software and services and so on. So I found a lot of 30, 35-year-old salespeople and asked them to read this book. This is going back 6 or 8 months ago now, and to get their feedback. Lots of recommendations, lots of suggestions. But the bottom line is they all loved it, absolutely loved it. So I figured, this is going to be, it's a page turner. We're not going to pretend it's going to be the best novel you've ever written. We'd love it to be at that sort of class, but I'm sure it won't be. But it's a page turner, and those that love sales, I think it'll be a reminder for a lot of the experts out there. It'll reinforce what they're doing and touch up maybe a little bit of what they should be doing. But for learners and people fairly new to sales, particularly larger B2B complex sales, I think they'll love it.
Well, first of all, I have to congratulate you on your ambition. I mean, as I said before, I haven't finished it, about a third of the way into it. It's unique for a sales book. As I said, it's the only sales book I've read where somebody actually dies in the book, as opposed to authors who die when people don't like their books.
I think it's in the first chapter, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So, as you said, you set it up, and like I said, it's very ambitious, but I think it's great to be able to come out with a new format that's just different than every other sales book that's out there.
Well, thank you, and we really do hope it creates some value for a lot of people out there.
Yeah, I mean, one thing you're passionate about is as many of us are, is creating change in sales. And I was reading something else you had written. You'd said a pebble does not cause a tsunami, and that's what's needed to create positive change in sales. So, what is this positive change you're envisioning?
Positive change is it's really interesting. Can I go back one step? We've got
Absolutely.
a third writer we brought into it, Jeff Clulow. So there's 3 authors in this book, and it was a collaborative effort that's gone on for years now. Jeff was going through a learning process. He's got business background, and big business background, but he hasn't got a direct B2B sales background. So he had to go through a learning process as we're writing it, and he ended up being more the novelist than Wayne and I in this book. And he kept wanting to say that this is a whole new way of selling, and I'd sit back and say, well, there's nothing new since the wheel was invented, really. We just build on what's happened in the past.
Right.
And the world of sales is changing. Everybody talks, every consultant I talk to, the world's changing. What's changed? Well, the way buyers buy and the buying journey and all that sort of stuff. Well, yes, it has. And the technology and the information that we've got access to, and the internet and all sorts of things. And now, the technology that's driving change now is all about artificial intelligence and machine learning and so on. It's making a massive change to how we sell. But the bottom line on the people that really knew how to sell back in my era and before is that selling is about working with another person, is engaging with another person. It's all about helping that other person drive change in themselves or their business. And in big business, it's a group of people making a decision to change. And so selling in one respect hasn't changed a lot when done properly. And the real essence of what we wanted to get across in the book is selling is about taking people through a thinking journey towards a change. It's not about selling your product. And so we really wanted to focus on that. Now, the book itself, half the book is in discovery. Now, if the people think of a sales process, discovery is an early stage in the sales process. Half the book is discovery. And there's a reason for that. That's where the real selling occurs. And yet in discovery, you never discuss your product in good selling.
Well, yeah, in good selling, right. And I want to dig into that a little bit deeper a little bit later. But
I figured you would.
But I think that you make such a great point, maybe just because it's one that I believe in very strongly myself, which is that the buyers, that's not about persuading somebody to buy your product. You're talking about influencing how they're thinking about their business, about what their problem is and what their potential outcomes are that they can have from solving that problem, which is a completely different mindset to take to selling than, I've got this product, I need to persuade somebody to buy it.
I learned that lesson very well, fairly early in my sales career.
Me too.
And if you don't mind, I might tell you a story.
Go ahead, please.
I was selling manufacturing solutions, manufacturing software. This is in the 80s. I was selling to a lighting manufacturer, this particular case. And I got very good at doing the walk around the manufacturing floor and talking about the queues in front of every machine and all that sort of stuff and understanding their issues and problems and challenges. So I did all that, took them through some thinking, and talked about what the outcome might be, and they visualised a new way in which they'd manufacture that have smaller queues, being able to go from way to go, design and develop a product and have it out the door much more quickly, all sorts of things that would drive their profitability and growth in their business. So they loved all this conversation, discussion, and eventually they said, this sounds good. We'd put a proposal on the table. Well, we need a demonstration of the software. And I hated that because every time you got into the software itself is not the solution.
Right.
And it's feature function type stuff. And they'll say, why does that happen there? And they get right away from the reason for the whole thing.
Yep.
So, all right, we do a demonstration. We brought them into the office. For the first time ever, the CEO was brought in. And he hadn't been involved in the process at all up to this stage. And there was about 12 in the room. And we had these are old green screens, 2 green screens sitting up there, and a big whiteboard. So I started whiteboarding, closed loop manufacturing, and just in time and all that sort of stuff, and having a dialogue. And the dialogue became very strong. And an hour and a half later, the CEO looked at his watch. This is brilliant, but I've got to go. I'm out of here. So guys, I've seen enough. Thanks. Let's go. And so they all stood up and said, thanks, John. That was great. Fantastic. And as they were walking out, a nerdy little guy at the back said, but I haven't seen the software yet. And the CEO sort of stopped, shook his head a little bit and said, no, I've seen enough. Come on. Well, what I've seen is great. And they left. We got the order signed.
Yep.
3 weeks later, I was out there with actually a CFO who was sort of the computer guy as well, and we're sort of walking around. The CEO walked past and said, good day, John, good to see you here. What are you here for? I said, we're working out where we're going to put the computer. And there was silence, and he looked at me and said, does a computer come with this? He had totally bought the outcome, no idea what the product was that was going to help deliver the outcome.
Sure.
And that, to me, taught me a great lesson. You're selling the outcome. You're helping them visualize where they're going to be and why it's valuable, and they then express that value in their own mind.
Yep.
The product is almost immaterial.
Well,
yes, you've got to have it. Yes, it's got to deliver what the end result is, but it's almost immaterial.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think that you're talking about influencing people's thinking, helping people make up their minds, and yet so much of training around selling and the way we orient sellers is that your job is to change the buyer's mind. And I think when you go into it with that perspective, that your job as a seller is to persuade somebody to change their mind about what they're doing, let's say, as opposed to helping them make up their mind about what that change could potentially be, it generates different outcomes.
Exactly. I use the word thinking journey. Our job is help the customer go through a thinking journey.
Yeah.
And in doing so, we do challenge them. We do disrupt their thinking. So I don't mind the word challenge. I don't mind the word disrupt.
I think disrupt is better.
Yeah.
I mean, and the reason being is that at least the way challenge is used, it's sort of like, okay, we're going to enable our sellers. Here are these, 3 challenges, right? And you're going to use them at this point in time, as opposed to when you're disrupting. To me, that's more organic, right? Because you're really listening to the buyer. It's unique to what the buyer is going through. And that canned business insight you have doesn't apply across the board.
It's whether it's disrupt, challenge, whatever. It's getting the customer through a thinking journey where as they come out of the other end of that thinking, the lights come on.
Yep.
This will make a difference to our business. I can see the value. I can see how we'll be operating in the future. We are going to improve our market share, reduce our costs dramatically. We're going to do this and this. Now they have a vision, and you've helped them realize that vision or develop that vision with the way we do it. And we can talk more about the way we do it, but certainly by asking questions and telling stories and taking them through a discovery process that I think is really important for us to think about how we do that.
Yeah, one other thing I want to talk to you first before we get into that is because I read this and you have this chart laid out for your sort of authentic selling process that you write about. And you have in there, and this is a point I just want to drill down because this is one that I've changed my own thinking about. Is for as many of us for years we sort of recited this statistic that's come out from I don't know who it was Serious Decisions or somewhere that buyers are X% of the way through their buying journey before they engage with a seller, and I used to believe that, but I guess I don't anymore. I mean, I think they may be some percentage of the way through the time they've allocated or budgeted to make a decision. But I don't think there's any way to measure percent of completion on a decision.
You raise a really important point. I believe if you've been called by a supplier, by a customer, potential customer, who says, we're looking to make a decision, we've got a challenge in our business, and we want to acquire a solution that's going to look like this, we think, you're too late. You're not going to help the customer much. You're going to put a product in front of them. You're going to go feature, function, benefit. You're going to try and get them back to more and more about their problem and try and dig deeper on the problem. But if they've done a lot of work on that, they don't want to go there. They've already done that. So you haven't got an opportunity to what I call sell. And a lot of people say, why do you use that word sell? We shouldn't be selling. Well, the fact is we are selling. And the word sell is the background, the meaning of the word sell. The old English word selan meant to give. And selling is all about giving and helping other people. It's not about us and getting an order. And if that's what our mindset is, get out of sales or change your mindset. So we need to get back to what it's all about, and it's helping other people. It really is.
Well, I think that as I've thought more about this, and part triggered by reading some things that you'd written, is that I look at some of what I diagnose as some of the real problems we have in sales today with really low win rates and much more of this reliance on sort of this persuasion-based, heavy-handed selling that we see certainly in the software world, because everybody's quote unquote a closer, is I think it's partly driven by this fact that everybody sort of bought into this myth that if the buyer, by the time they fully engage with the buyer, they're already halfway through their decision-making process. So thus, to your point, I can't change their minds about what they think their problem is and how they want to solve it. I can only battle on the front of them choosing me as a vendor. And I think I think it creates a set of behaviors that are very counterproductive and that have led us to where we are today.
Every buying journey starts with their status quo being upset. Something has upset the system. It can be a problem. It can be something like they're losing market share. The big ones losing market share, or profitability is dropping, or whatever. Or it can be smaller problems. Whatever the issues and challenges are, something's upset their status quo. Well, the reality is, good salespeople are really good at upsetting the status quo by going in and asking questions that make the customer think, the world's changing and I'm not keeping up. Thank you for raising it. What should we do about it? So it's that very start. And, what causes that? Well, people talk about trigger events, and there are lots of trigger events happening all the time in business. And the really good executives are looking for them all the time. What's happening in my business and the businesses around me and the environment around me that I need to be aware of, a trigger that's happening that means we need to start thinking about something. That's when this buying journey begins. We as salespeople need to be there then or soon after that if we're really going to help the customer through their buying journey. It's too late later on, and the opportunity to sell is no longer there.
Well, if we're too late, somebody else has done the work that we want to have done.
Whether it's another salesperson, or it's a consulting company, or it's whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I love this, framing you put on in terms of influencing the thinking of the buyer, because I think one of the problems, besides having sales processes that are completely disconnected from the buying process, is that we don't really fundamentally understand the buying process. And I've had this very simple framework I use with people on this, is that think about the buying process as really three steps, if you will, and very simply they're the what step, the how step, and the who step. What's our problem, right? What's the problem we're trying to solve? Mm-hmm. What are the outcomes we can achieve?
Yep.
The how step is, well, how are we going to do that?
What are the options?
What are the options?
Different options. Which one makes the best sense? Yeah.
Right. And the what and the how have nothing to do with the product. That's
your
point. If you're talking product in the what and the how stages, you're playing the losing game, because it's not what the buyer needs from you. And then once they choose an option, then the third order decision is, well, who are we going to do this with?
Yeah. Who has something that will do this for us?
Right.
But help us do this. Yeah.
But if you're not in there influencing the what and the how, you have no opportunity to win on the who, because at that point, all you're doing is just flogging a product, as you talk about. I love your term, product floggers. You're just a product flogger at that point, and you're selling basically on features and price.
That's right. And that's right. And you may or may not win the business, but if you do win, you're going to win at a much reduced margin. You won't be seen as a real valued provider that's going to be in there for the long term necessarily. There's all sorts of issues with doing it that way. If you win, and your chances of winning are much, much less. And of course, the other thing, if you go right back to the beginning of the buying journey and identify an issue or problem, there's many, many different ways of addressing that. When they've got through to when they're going to talk to suppliers, they've made a decision on how they're going to address it. There could have been other ways, and you may have a different way of addressing it, but you haven't had an opportunity to bring them to that. So you don't even know that an opportunity exists because they haven't come to you with your particular type of solution, or thinking about your particular type of solution.
Right. Well, it just raises a point I thought it'd be good to touch on, because you sort of raised a little bit before. But so, from in a desired state, what is selling?
What is selling?
Yeah.
Well, to me, bottom line, selling is helping a customer achieve an outcome for their business. And I'm talking business customers here, of course.
Yeah.
And that customer means multiple people. But helping a customer achieve an outcome that is valued by them. That's what sales is. And that process you go through to do that is a process where you help a customer fully understand the current situation, the problems they've got, the implications of those problems, number one. Mm-hmm. And then you take them on a thinking journey. Say, okay, if we've got that problem, let's think about different ways of addressing it. and we take them on a journey, a thinking journey to a new way of thinking that they say, aha, that's highly valuable. So it's going to address my problems and deliver these outcomes. And by the way, we haven't talked about a product yet.
Yeah.
This is a way they're going to operate their business. And yeah, that's what I call it, and the book calls it discover and disrupt.
Right.
That's the essence of selling. All the rest, when you start introducing your product, put a proposal together, demonstrate products, whatever you do, are just confirming what they've already bought. They bought the outcome, they bought the philosophy, they bought the vision. They haven't yet bought the product, but that's the easy part once they've bought the vision.
Yeah. And so let's talk then about discovery. Yeah, in your opinion, I think you would agree. As do I, you consider it the most important part of the process. Why is that?
I guess it's everything we've just been discussing. It's where you create value for your customer. Mm-hmm. And by the way, a good salesperson is much more value to the customer than a good product.
Oh,
Think
absolutely.
About that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So all these organizations that say, well, we're going to hire a salesperson because he knows how to sell, because he knows how to pick up our product and put the product in front of the customer and get the customer to buy the product, they don't understand what a good salesperson actually does. Right? They're in there as a consultant. They're in there helping the customer understand their challenges and issues, and then take them on a thinking journey to a new way of thinking. Right, that's what selling is. Then going to the product. See, I talk about it all the time, but it's so frustrating because.
Well, I'm with you. I mean, I'm with you in that frustration. So my definition of selling is slightly different, but aligned with yours because it's like almost step before yours but it plays right into this topic of discovery, which is, to me, selling is about how you listen. As a seller, you listen to understand what's the most important thing to the customer and then help them get that.
Yeah.
And so when I talk with discovery about people, I say, well, what's the purpose of discovery? And everybody talks about, gathering information and so on. It's like, no, it's really about understanding, isn't it? Right. And through the process of asking questions to help yourself understand is you're helping the buyer understand.
That's the point. And I've got, Wayne has a customer that very early in the piece, when one of Wayne's people was selling to him, the salesperson said, look, I need to come in and do my discovery. And the customer looked at him and said, I don't want you to do your discovery. I want you to help me do my discovery.
My discovery, right?
and if you think about it from a mindset point of view, if we have the mindset that we're going to go in and I'm going to discover what the customer situation is and what the problems and implications are, you're not creating any value for the customer. You've got the wrong mindset. It's all about you, not the customer. Your mindset's got to be, I'm going to go in and help the customer discover.
Yes, absolutely. Right. It's you're helping buyer, customer define the problem they're trying to solve. You can't go in with the assumption, and this is what too many sellers do. It's a fatal assumption on the part of sellers, is that the buyers have a perfect understanding of their problem or the potential outcomes they could achieve by solving it. And they might have some knowledge about it, because, they've done some research, they've looked online, so on, but they don't have an understanding.
No. A lot of people with, the old solution selling model, and solution selling done right is nothing wrong with it. But more often than not, solution selling is done wrong. And that is, I'm going to ask the customer what his problem is. And when he or she describes that problem, I will then say, I have a solution for that, and I'll propose my solution. We're not creating any value for the customer at all. And I don't blame customers saying, get out of my office, you're not helping me, you're not creating value for me, and I don't want your product until I understand more about the issues I've got, and the challenges I've got, the implications of those, and what the options are, and you take me on a thinking journey or whatever. Solution selling in that raw form is just no value.
Right. Yeah, I don't know whether it's a mindset. It's like, how do we reorient thinking, right? Because this is when we look at sales behaviors that we think, okay, these are not optimal. These aren't helping the buyer. It's all about the seller. These are not innate human behaviors, I don't believe.
They're not.
And
They're not.
they're acquired. This is why we train people. So, but what you're describing and the things that we've been talking about here today, because you and I think are pretty aligned on this, is much more around natural human behaviors, right? Where you lead with curiosity. You want to understand. You have empathy for someone. Where do we go wrong?
Well, you think about it. You sit around a dinner table and you have a conversation around the dinner table, and the ones that are recognized as outstanding conversationalists and take that conversation to a new area, and everybody gets excited about the way we're changing the world or whatever. It's guys that the guys or girls that are curious, that are asking questions, that are interested in the other people, and yet we train people to be just the opposite. We train people. Here's your product. It's really going to drive change out here. Here's how it can drive change. Go and talk about how you can drive change in your customers and how the product's going to do that. It's a cultural thing in companies, and I think I need to emphasize the book. When we wrote the book, we thought the real change has to happen in organizations. They need to think differently as an organization about how they sell. It's not an individual changing. When the organization changes and their behavior is the right sort of behavior, it'll drive the right sort of behavior in the salespeople and the sales team.
So it starts at the top.
That's where the change has to occur. So the book actually goes back and says, well, how can we get sales leaders to understand that? Well, we wrote a story about how a sale occurs, and the book helps them. And by the way, we have wonderful characters in the book, both evil characters and good characters, if you like.
Right.
We have the evil sales managers and the good sales managers. We have the evil companies and the good companies. And it's all to help us understand this. So ultimately, to illustrate this point, recently I was working with a startup, a mature startup. And they'd got to the stage where they decided they needed to hire 4 new salespeople in the business, and most of the selling up till then had been done by the CEO and a couple of the other people in the organisation. And they went out and they decided they had a great funding. They decided they're going to pay a lot of money to get really good salespeople, and they'd hired in some guys and girls with some really good track record that year after year had been successful. And none of those salespeople were successful in their organisation. They failed dismally. And that's when they brought me and I looked at it, and it was exactly the issue we're talking about. The founder and everybody else were so in love with their product and the enthusiasm, etc., and they had their network, and they'd worked with their network, and they'd got sales. But they didn't understand what selling was, and they brought in top salespeople, said, here's our product, here's why it's wonderful, go out and sell it. And they had none of the framework in place, the culture to support a selling organisation, a sales force, and these top salespeople all failed. And it wasn't because they didn't have a great product. They had a wonderful product, but they all failed. So it gets back to getting that right culture in place in your organisation, getting everybody with the right mindset. It's about the customer and helping the customer through their journey, and that's not about our product. It's not about talking about us. That's the point.
Yeah, I like to say it's a battle of ideas, not a battle of products.
Yeah.
And if you have no ideas to help them with, to enable the buyer with, the customer with, you got to be on the outside looking in.
You've read the first 100 pages or so of the book, and you will have seen that our heroine has developed some great domain expertise. She's selling cybersecurity solutions into the financial industry, and she developed some really strong domain expertise around the financial industry and how cybersecurity is impacting the financial industry. and we made that or emphasised that in the book and in the Heron, because in my view, if you don't have domain expertise in some aspect of the customer domain, there's no way you can have those valuable conversations. And yet we tend to train our people in our product and not in a good understanding of the customer's domain.
For sure. I mean, oftentimes gets sort of left behind because, again, we think that everything's about the product. I mean, look at the hot new trend in sales is called product-led growth. It's not about the customer, it's about the product. And it's not like it's really new. It's sort of a rehash of what's done, something that's been done before. But yeah, it's sort of well, let me ask another question, because we're talking sort of generic questions that are really relevant to sort of re-envisioning sales in a way that is more effective, especially selling to the enterprise, is value. So perhaps the most overused words in sales is value. So in your mind, what is value?
Well, I'm going to go back to what we were just discussing, and that's mindset. Again, a lot of us teach our salespeople to talk value, the value of my proposal, the value of my solution for you, Mr. Customer, is. Mm-hmm. There's only one person that really can express the value, or one organisation. That's the customer. Mm-hmm. Okay, and so again, we need that mindset. Our conversation with the customer needs to be asking the customer to, as we take them through that thinking journey to a new way of thinking, to get them to express what the value of that would be to them, not us trying to tell them our value proposition is. Boom. It's all about the customer. And the value is whatever the customer perceives. It's not what we perceive. And so it's so important that we're asking the customer all the time, what do you perceive as the value in what we're discussing? That's value. Now, that could be anything, right? Whatever the customer wants it to be. Yeah. But once we understand it, we're now in a position to be able to help them achieve that value. And I'll tell you what, no matter how they express it, more often than not, our price will be just such a small percentage of that value that it's exactly. Irrelevant.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, to me, as I look at it as, everything you sort of said is, but if you look at the implications of providing whether it's a question, a white paper, a case study, whatever form it takes, something that you're providing to the buyer that they acknowledge has value to them. What value ends up becoming really is progress, right? As a result of you conveying and delivering this value to the buyer, and again, in whatever form, they are some way closer to being able to make a decision than they were before you provided it to them.
Yep. I don't like the word delivering, by the way, the value. Yeah, right. The value is achieved by the customer with your help. But they perceive what the value might be, and then when you start implementing a solution or start proposing a solution, first off, they'll look at that and say, am I going to get that value I perceived? Yes, I am. Now we'll do implementation. Am I getting that value I perceived? It's their perception of value.
Absolutely.
And I hate company value propositions. I hate a statement of what our value is because it's again a statement that drives the wrong mindset. It's driving us and what we achieve for the customer versus what the customer can achieve with our help.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's our statement of what we perceive our value to be.
Yeah, and I'd much rather tell stories about how other customers have achieved the value they perceived with our help than I would about our value proposition is, and this is how we've delivered it in the past, and so on.
Right.
It's not us. It's them. It's all about the customer.
So, as reading through everything that you've done is it's like, and this I've arrived at this conclusion. I'm not the only one. We're not the only ones, but is just the culture has to change around sales, around B2B selling, and I think this is what makes it so challenging because it's just like selling to a customer. There's inertia because for most sales organizations, at one level or another, they're basically saying, well, hey, the way we're doing it now is good enough. And that's a mindset. It's
And
good enough.
once you begin with that mindset, that's the first step towards failure.
Yeah.
First step towards going out backwards.
Yeah. So it's like sort of last question we have time to sort of dig into. It's just like, how, I know we talked before, we got to start at the top, but what's the way to make a CEO or CRO or sales leader of some sort, this group of people sort of buy into this idea that there's actually more we can achieve, and more in a way that is beneficial to the buyer, beneficial to us, because not only do we establish these better relationships, they're longer term, so lifetime customer value goes up. Lots of values from being able to sell this way.
Well, you're absolutely right. It starts from the top, and the challenge is to work to find the people in the top of the organisation that do get their mind around that we need to change. That can come from a whole host of things. In the book, it started coming from the fact that the financial institution, they had all sorts of cybersecurity issues, but everything they were doing to try and address it was impacting their customer relationships, the customer experience. And so the executive were learning, they weren't learning fast enough, and with the heroine's help, they got to learn that, wow, hang on a second, we're fixing one problem over here and creating another problem over here. And this salesperson's helped us understand that. So they actually went out and did a whole lot more customer experience research to find out what the problem was, and then rethought the way they were addressing cybersecurity over here. You've got to find the executives in the organisation that are switched on, and most are. I mean, if you go and look at most organisations, I looked at research recently that said something like 70% of CEOs and senior executives want to have their thinking disrupted because they know they need to have their thinking disrupted to survive and grow in business.
Right.
So they're looking for people that will help them do that. So if we go in and say, hey, let's think about the way you're dealing with your customers, and I think you might have a cultural issue. Let's go back and talk about what the issues might be. You're going through a sales process with the executive. And unless you get them across the line and say, right, we really have to drive a cultural change in our organisation. I understand what it is, and then help them start changing their behaviour in the way they interact in meetings, on if they're out with customers, if they're wherever they are in their business, they've got to start walking the talk. So they have to go through that cultural change, and then they drive it down through the organisation. It's a tough road, but it's doable. And I've seen it done so many times that once you get that executive with the right mindset, you now can put a whole lot of actions in place that will drive it out through the organisation. I guess training is a big bugbear of mine, because so many organisations spend a fair bit of money on training salespeople, and they put them through all sorts of different training, and sales training, how to hold a conversation, how to do a discovery, and all of it's absolutely wasted if it's just a training program. And we all know, 3 weeks after a training program, people go back to what they were doing and forget 90% of what they learnt. So it's got to be reinforced. So you can put people through a change program, which includes training, but there needs to be behavioural change behind that to help them actually change that mindset we're talking about, positioning the customer as number one, having all the right conversations with the customer, as we've discussed, both in discovery, developing value, and so on. But the organisation's got to be supporting the salesperson in doing that. Sales manager, or the sales enablement people, the pre-sales people, the delivery people, everybody. It is a whole change that we need to go through. But I'm not saying it's easy, but get the right people in place at the top, and it's remarkable what they can achieve.
Perfect. All right. Well, John, thank you so much for joining me. So if people want to learn more about your novel, how can they do that?
Well, go to wherever you buy your books, the Wentworth Prospect, Do a search on the Wentworth Prospect. My name, John Smibert, Wayne Maloney, and Jeff Clulow are the three authors. Look, I'm really looking forward. If you pick up this book, I want feedback. We want to put out multiple editions of this book. We want to continually improve it. We think we have something that will really help you start driving the change we're talking about in your organisation at an executive level. If you're a salesperson, you'll understand, particularly if your organisation is trying to become much more customer oriented, you'll understand how to sell more effectively within your organisation to your customers. So we need the feedback. Give us the feedback. And anybody that reads it and thinks it's as good as I think it is, please put up a quick review on Amazon or wherever you buy your book. We think we have a real game changer with this book. So really looking for everybody's feedback.
Excellent. And of course, they can connect with you on LinkedIn probably as well.
Anybody you need to connect with me, just jump on LinkedIn and send me a message.
Perfect. Well, John, a pleasure as always.
Oh, it's been great to talk with you, Andy. Sorry, I get a bit passionate sometimes, but it's so important.
No, I love it. I love it.
We need to drive professionalism in the world of B2B.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm 100% aligned with you on that. So, my new book coming out in February deals with similar.
I'm looking forward to that.
Deals with similar topics in a different way, but I think you'll appreciate that book as well. So, all right, John, thank you so much.
Thank you, Andy. Have a great day.
Okay, friends, that's it for this episode. First of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. I'm so grateful for your support of the show. And I want to thank my guest, John Smibert, for sharing his insights with us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, Sales Enablement with Andy Paul, on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. So thank you for that. And thank you so much for investing your time with me today. Until next time, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.